The ceremonial hall fell silent the moment I stepped through the archway. 200 alien dignitaries turned as one, their crystalline eyes reflecting the bioluminescent chandeliers above. I was the only human in the room, the only representative of Earth at the Galactic Council's Peace Summit, and I had exactly 30 seconds before protocol demanded I bow before the Valerian throne. 29. 28. The Valerian Empire controlled half the known galaxy. Their warriors could shatter starship hulls with their bare hands. Their queen had ended 3 interstellar wars with a single transmitted word. And I was about to meet her daughter. The crowd parted. At the far end of the hall, seated on a floating dais of pure light, was the royal family. Queen Ashira dominated the space like a living weapon, her silver armor seeming to drink the light around her. Beside her sat Princess Lyran. I'd seen her image in the briefing files. None of them had prepared me. She was watching me with an intensity that made my chest tight. Her skin held the faint luminescence of her people, pale blue shot through with veins of gold. When our eyes met across the expanse of polished stone, something shifted in her expression. 10 seconds. I reached the prescribed distance, and began the formal bow Earth's diplomats had drilled into me for 6 weeks. Kneel on the left knee. Right fist to chest. Eyes down. A child's voice shattered the silence. Mama, why does the human look scared? The small Valerian boy couldn't have been more than 4 in human years. He'd slipped from his attendant's grasp and now stood 3 feet from me, head tilted with pure curiosity. Every guard in the room tensed. I saw hands move toward weapons in my peripheral vision. Step back, honored one, I said softly, keeping my eyes down. Protocol forbade looking directly at royal children without permission. But your heart is loud, the boy insisted. I can hear it from here. He was right. Valorians had hearing sensitive enough to detect pulse rates from across a room. The queen would know I was terrified. Caden. The princess's voice was gentle but firm. Return to your place. I risked a glance up. The boy was the princess's son. That made him 3rd in line to control half the galaxy, and he was currently poking my shoulder with one small finger. Why are you scared? He asked again. The honest answer came out before I could stop it. Because I don't want to make a mistake that starts a war. The child laughed, high and clear. Mama says humans are funny. Are you funny? Something dangerously close to a smile tried to form on my face. The absurdity of the situation, kneeling before the most powerful family in the galaxy while being interrogated by a 4-year-old, struck something in me that 6 weeks of diplomatic training hadn't quite crushed. I smiled. It was barely there, just a slight quirk at the corner of my mouth, but it was enough. The boy grinned back and ran to his mother. Mama, Mama, he smiled at me. The human smiled. Princess Lyran's expression softened in a way that transformed her face entirely. For just a moment, she wasn't the heir to an empire. She was a mother watching her son make a new friend. She smiled back at me. The temperature in the room plummeted. I felt it before I saw it, a pressure change that made my ears pop and my breath fog in the suddenly frigid air. Queen Ashira had risen from her throne. When I finally looked up at her, I understood why civilization surrendered rather than face Valerian wrath. Her eyes held the cold vastness of space itself. The human diplomat will approach the throne. Her voice resonated in a register that vibrated through my bones. I stood on shaking legs. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. Valerian guards had materialized behind me, their presence a wall of living metal and controlled violence. I walked forward. Each step echoed like a countdown. The queen studied me with the focus of a predator deciding whether something was prey or poison. Behind her, Princess Lyran had gone very still, her son clutched protectively against her side. You smiled at my daughter. The words were precise, each one carved from ice. My throat had gone dry. Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect. The boy asked if I was funny, and my daughter smiled in return. The silence that followed was absolute. No one in the hall seemed to be breathing. In our culture, The Queen continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. When an unmated royal smiles at someone outside formal greeting, it carries weight. When that smile is returned in the presence of her child, it carries more. My mind raced through the cultural briefings, but nothing had covered this. Nothing had prepared me for the way the Queen's expression was shifting into something I couldn't quite read. My grandson has declared you made him happy. My daughter has shown you favor before the assembled council. The Queen's next words fell like a hammer. Tell me, human diplomat, what are your intentions toward the Princess Lyran? The hall erupted. Shouts in a dozen languages crashed over me. The Valerian guards closed ranks around the throne. Somewhere, an alarm began to sound, not for danger, but for what I suddenly realized was something far more complicated. I'd accidentally initiated a formal courtship with the heir to the Valerian Empire. And, judging by the chaos erupting around me, no one was sure if that would start a war or prevent one. The Queen raised one hand. Silence crashed down like a physical force. She was still watching me, waiting for an answer that could reshape the political landscape of half the galaxy. Princess Lyran met my eyes across the distance between us. In her face I saw fear and hope and something else I couldn't name. Her son peeked out from behind her, still grinning at me like I'd just done something wonderful instead of potentially catastrophic. I started, and realized the entire future of human-Valorian relations hung on my next words. The Queen leaned forward slightly. Choose carefully, human. My heart hammered against my ribs. The princess's expression hadn't changed, but I saw her hand tighten protectively on her son's shoulder. In that moment, looking at them both, I made the most important decision of my life. Your Majesty, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded, I would never presume to approach your daughter without proving myself worthy of such an honor. But if she were to grant me the opportunity to try, I would consider it the greatest privilege of my existence. The words hung in the air like a suspended sentence. Then, the Queen did something no one expected. She smiled, a fierce, sharp expression that held pride and challenge and dark amusement. Then, you will have that opportunity, human. But know this. She descended from her throne, each step deliberate, until she stood close enough that I could see my reflection in her armor. Valerian courtship trials have killed stronger beings than you. Warriors who could tear apart your starships barehanded have failed to prove themselves worthy of royal consideration. She leaned in close enough that only I could hear her final words. And none of them had to win the heart of a widow who swore she would never take another mate, or a child who trusts no outsiders. Her voice dropped even lower. Fail either of them, and there will be no corner of this galaxy where you can hide from my wrath. She pulled back, her voice returning to full volume. The human diplomatic envoy will remain at court. The trial period begins at dawn. The princess stood, her son still held against her side. For a moment our eyes met again. In hers I saw terror and something that might have been hope. I'd come to the Valerian homeworld to negotiate a trade agreement. Instead, I just agreed to court the second most powerful being in half the galaxy, win over a traumatized child, and survive trials designed to kill me. All because I'd smiled. As the court dissolved into frantic whispers and the diplomatic corps from Earth probably had collective heart failure somewhere behind me, I caught the princess's gaze one more time. This time, I didn't look away. Neither did she. Her son waved at me, and despite everything, despite the insanity of the situation, the danger I'd just walked into, and the weight of two civilizations now watching my every move, I felt something shift inside my chest. Maybe this was exactly where I was supposed to be. The guards escorted me from the hall, and I realized with crystalline clarity that my life had just changed forever. Behind me, I heard the Queen's voice giving orders, felt the weight of Princess Lyran's gaze following me until the doors closed. Dawn would come in 8 hours. I had no idea what the trials would demand, no preparation, no strategy. Just the memory of a child's laugh, a princess's careful hope, and a queen's lethal warning. Somewhere in the diplomatic quarters, Earth's senior ambassador was probably already composing my obituary. But when I closed my eyes, all I could see was the way Princess Lyran had looked at me in that final moment, like someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to hope and was terrified to remember. I'd smiled at her. She'd smiled back. Now I just had to survive long enough to see if that smile could become something more. The Valerian night settled over the palace like a hell breath, and I stood at the window of my assigned quarters, watching the twin moons rise over an alien sky, knowing that when they set, everything would begin. The first trial was called the Proving of Intent, and it started without warning. I woke to find my quarters surrounded by 12 Valerian warriors, each one capable of crushing my skull with a casual grip. Their commander, a scarred veteran named Thex, informed me I had 1 hour to reach the central courtyard without using any designated pathways. The palace was a living maze designed to confuse and trap intruders. I had no map, no guide, and the warriors made it clear they wouldn't be offering help. I made it with 4 minutes to spare, arriving covered in scratches from climbing through a garden trellis system and soaked from swimming through a decorative water channel. Princess Lyran stood waiting, her expression carefully neutral, but I caught the faintest flicker of something, approval, maybe, when she saw I'd succeeded. Caden broke free from his attendant and ran to me. "You're all wet. Did you swim? Mama says humans don't like cold water." "I'm not fond of it," I admitted, water dripping from my hair. "But I didn't want to be late." The boy's eyes went wide. "You swam through the serpent channels? But those are scary." "They were very scary," I agreed. "I kept thinking about how disappointed you'd be if I gave up, though." Caden processed this, then grabbed my hand with both of his. "You're braver than you look." Behind him, Princess Lyran's carefully controlled expression cracked just slightly. For a heartbeat, I saw something raw in her face, grief, maybe, or longing. Then, it was gone, locked away behind royal composure. Queen Ashira descended from an observation platform I hadn't noticed. "The human passes the first trial. The second begins now." Before I could ask what that meant, Caden stumbled. His small face went pale, and his knees buckled. I caught him before he hit the ground, my diplomatic training evaporating in the face of a child's distress. "What's wrong? What happened?" "Move aside." A Valerian physician materialized beside me, but Caden's grip on my sleeve tightened. "Don't go," he whispered. The physician began a scan, instruments glowing across Caden's small body. Princess Lyran appeared at my shoulder, her presence like controlled lightning. "Caden suffers from solar flux syndrome," she said quietly. "His body rejects the genetic modifications that allow us to process certain wavelengths of light. He has episodes like this. They pass." But her hands were shaking. The physician stepped back. "The episode is minor, Your Highness. He needs rest and reduced stimulation." Caden's grip didn't loosen. "Tell me a story. Like you promised." I blinked. "I didn't promise. You said humans are funny." "Funny means stories. Mama says so." Princess Lyran looked at me, and in her eyes I saw a question. More than a question, a test. Not one designed by the Queen or the Council, but by a mother watching a stranger hold her sick child. I sat down on the courtyard floor, still soaked and exhausted, with the heir to the throne's grandson in my lap and half the palace guard watching. "All right," I said. "But this is an Earth story, so it might seem strange." "Good," Caden murmured against my chest. "Strange is interesting." I told him about a fox and a prince, about roses and asteroids, about how important things are invisible to the eye. His breathing steadied as I spoke, his small body relaxing against mine. When I finished, he was nearly asleep. Princess Lyran carefully lifted him from my arms, her fingers brushing mine for just a moment. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. "He hasn't let anyone but me hold him during an episode since his father died." Before I could respond, she was gone, carrying her son toward the royal wing with her attendants flowing around her like a protective current. Queen Ashira remained, watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. The second trial was not a test of strength or cleverness, she said. It was a test of instinct. You moved to protect my grandson without hesitation. You comforted him without being asked. You understood what my daughter needed without being told. She paused, and for the first time since I'd met her, the Queen looked almost human in her concern. But understand this, human, Caden's condition is part of why my daughter swore never to take another mate. She could not bear to bring someone into his life who might leave, either through death or rejection. The boy has been hurt enough. I would never, you cannot promise that. Her voice cut like a blade. You are mortal in ways even we are not. Your lifespan is a fraction of ours. If you pursue this path, you are asking my daughter to watch you age and die while she and her son continue on. You are asking Caden to lose another father. The weight of it hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on surviving the trials, on proving myself worthy, that I hadn't considered the cruel mathematics of different species' lifespans. Then, why allow this at all? I asked. Why not simply forbid it? The Queen's expression softened into something almost sad. Because my daughter smiled for the first time in 3 years when she looked at you. Because my grandson, who has not trusted an outsider since his father's death, held your hand and asked you for a story. She met my eyes with absolute directness. Because sometimes hope is worth the inevitable pain it brings. But you need to understand the costs before you continue. Both to them and to yourself. I thought about Princess Lyren's careful hope. About Caden's small hand in mine. About the impossible complexity of trying to build something real across the gap between species, cultures, lifespans. I understand, I said finally. And I still want to try. The Queen studied me for a long moment. Then, the third trial begins tomorrow. It will test whether you can protect what you claim to value. She left me standing in the courtyard as the sun climbed higher, warming the stones and evaporating the water from my clothes. Somewhere above, in the royal quarters, a child was sleeping and a princess was watching the sky, both of them carrying wounds I couldn't heal and hoping for something I might not be able to give. But I was going to try anyway. The night before the third trial, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my window watching the palace gardens shift in the moonlight, trying to quiet the voice in my head that insisted I was making a terrible mistake. The door chimed softly. Princess Lyren stood in the hallway, alone except for a single guard who remained at a discreet distance. She wore simple clothing instead of formal robes, and her luminescent skin seemed to glow brighter in the dim light. "May I come in?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. I stepped aside, my heart suddenly racing. She entered with fluid grace, then turned to face me. For a moment neither of us spoke. "Caden asked about you tonight," she said finally. "He wanted to know if you were coming back. I told him you were preparing for tomorrow's trial." She paused. "He asked if you might fail? If you might leave? What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you might." Her eyes met mine, and I saw the fear there. "That everyone leaves eventually, one way or another." The pain in those words was a living thing. "Your husband," I said carefully. "I was told he died, but not how." "In battle. Defending a trade convoy from raiders." Her voice remained steady, but I saw her hands clench. "He was a warrior, born and trained for combat. The strongest fighter I'd ever met. And it still wasn't enough." She looked away. Caden was 2 years old. He barely remembers his father now, just fragments and images I've shown him. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She turned back, and her expression had hardened. "Be certain. Because Caden is starting to care about you, and if you fail tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that, if you leave because the trials are too hard or because you realize this was a mistake, you won't just be breaking whatever this is between us. You'll be breaking a child who's already learned too young that people he loves disappear." The weight of it pressed down on me like atmosphere. "And if I succeed? If I pass every trial and prove myself worthy by whatever standard your mother sets?" I took a step closer. "You heard what the Queen said. I'm human. I'll age and die while you're still in your prime. How is that any different from leaving? Because chosen mortality is different from sudden absence. Her voice cracked slightly. Because watching someone age beside you is different from wondering if today is the day they don't come home. Because... She stopped, clearly fighting for control. I waited, watching emotions war across her face. Because I'm tired of being safe, she whispered finally. I'm tired of protecting myself and my son from every possible hurt. I've spent 3 years building walls, and then you smiled at me in a throne room full of dignitaries and those walls cracked. I don't know if that makes you dangerous or necessary, but I know I want to find out. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the fine gold patterns in her skin shift with her pulse. So I'm asking you directly, without the trials or my mother's tests or any of the formal structure, do you want this? Not the diplomatic advantage or the political alliance. This. Me. A widow with a sick child and more trauma than sense, who lives in a culture you don't fully understand and will outlive you by centuries. My mouth had gone dry. Yes. Why? Because when I saw you smile at your son, I saw something I've been looking for my entire life without knowing it. The words came easier than they should have. Because in 37 years, I've never met anyone who made me want to be braver just by existing in the same room. Because that child asked me if I was funny and trusted me to hold him when he was hurting, and the thought of losing that trust feels like losing something essential. I took a breath. And because you're right, I don't fully understand your culture, and I'll age faster than you, and this is probably the most complicated situation I could possibly walk into. But complicated doesn't mean wrong. She studied my face like she was memorizing it. The trials will get harder. Tomorrow you'll face combat scenarios designed for Valerian warriors. You could die. I know. And if you survive tomorrow, there will be political trials. Social ones. Tests of diplomacy and cultural knowledge. Ways to fail that have nothing to do with physical strength. I know that too. And even if you pass all of them, even if my mother declares you worthy and the council accepts it, we'll face opposition. Factions who think humans are inferior. Groups who believe I should marry for political advantage. People who will say terrible things about you, about us, about Caden. Her voice dropped lower. It won't be easy. I don't need easy, I said. I need real. Something in her expression shifted. Tomorrow's trial begins at dawn. You should rest. She moved toward the door, and I felt the moments slipping away. Lyran. She turned back. I'd used her name without her title, and we both knew it was a transgression of protocol. If I survive tomorrow, I said carefully, would you have dinner with me? Not as a trial or a formal event. Just dinner. A smile ghosted across her face. Ask me after you survive. She left, taking the warmth in the room with her. I stood at the window until dawn painted the sky purple and gold, thinking about what I was fighting for and what it would cost if I failed. The third trial began with Vex handing me a training blade and leading me to an arena where 12 Valerian warriors waited. Queen Ashira watched from a raised platform, her expression carved from stone. Beside her stood Princess Lyran, with Caden holding her hand. The trial is simple, Vex announced. Survive for 10 minutes. The warriors activated their weapons, crackling energy staffs that could shatter bone. They moved into formation with the fluid precision of lifelong fighters. I was going to die. But Caden was watching. Lyran was watching. And I told them I was going to try. The first warrior came in fast, staff swinging for my ribs. I barely dodged, the energy field close enough to raise the hair on my arms. Another attacked from the left, forcing me to roll away. They were toying with me, testing my reflexes. I lasted 45 seconds before the first real strike connected with my shoulder, sending me sprawling. Pain exploded down my arm, and I tasted blood from where I'd bitten my tongue. 8 minutes remain, Vex called out. I struggled to my feet. The warriors circled closer. I had no chance of beating them, no hope of lasting 8 more minutes through skill alone. So I changed tactics. Instead of trying to fight, I focused purely on survival. Dodging, rolling, using their own spacing against them. When one warrior committed to a strike, I made sure another was in the way of their follow-through. I exploited every second of recovery time, every gap in their coordination. I took hits, brutal ones that left me gasping and probably broke ribs, but I stayed on my feet. Barely. At 5 minutes, Thex called out. The human shows persistence. Increase intensity. The warrior's attacks came faster, harder. I felt something in my leg give way, and suddenly I was on one knee, staff raised desperately to block an overhead strike. The energy field crashed against my blade and I knew I couldn't hold it. The warrior above me was twice my size and 3 times my strength. The staff was going to break through and end me. Then, Caden's voice rang across the arena. Get up! You promised you wouldn't quit! I hadn't promised that. But the child believed I had, believed I was strong enough, believed I wouldn't leave him. I roared and somehow pushed back, redirecting the strike just enough to roll away. My leg screamed in protest, but I forced myself upright. 2 minutes, Thex announced, and I heard surprise in his voice. The warriors stepped back, regrouping. One of them nodded at me, a gesture of respect that felt more valuable than gold. The final 2 minutes were eternity. I barely moved, just kept my guard up and weathered the storm of attacks. When Thex finally called time, I collapsed immediately, my body having carried me exactly as far as necessary and not one step further. Caden broke away from his mother and ran to me, dropping to his knees beside where I'd fallen. You did it! You didn't quit! I managed to smile through the pain. Couldn't disappoint you. The Queen descended from her platform as Valerian medics swarmed around me, sealing wounds and checking for critical injuries. She studied me with that same unreadable expression. You should have fallen in the first minute, she said. You lacked the strength, the speed, the training to face my warriors. Yes, Your Majesty. Yet you lasted the full time. She paused. Why? I looked past her to where Princess Lyran stood, her expression caught between fear and pride. Because someone asked me to. The Queen's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. The human passes the 3rd trial. Tomorrow's test will be different. She glanced at her daughter. Tomorrow, we test his heart instead of his body. As the medics helped me to my feet, Caden still holding onto my hand, I caught Lyran's eye. She smiled at me again, fuller this time, less guarded, and the pain from my injuries suddenly felt like a distant thing. I'd survived. And tomorrow I'd face whatever came next, because quitting wasn't an option anymore. Not when a child believed in me and a princess had started hoping again. The 4th trial came in the form of a formal dinner with the Valerian nobility. Thex informed me this was actually more dangerous than the arena. Warriors could only kill my body, but nobles could destroy any hope of acceptance into Valerian society. I entered the banquet hall with my ribs still aching from the previous day's beating. 70 noble families filled the space, each one scrutinizing me with varying degrees of suspicion, contempt, or cruel curiosity. Princess Lyran sat at the high table beside her mother. Caden had been deemed too young for the formal event, which somehow made it worse. I didn't have his innocent enthusiasm to anchor me. Lord Vex, head of the most conservative noble faction, was the first to strike. He waited until the 2nd course had been served before raising his voice loud enough to carry across the hall. Tell me, human, what exactly qualifies you to court our princess? Your species has barely achieved faster than light travel. You have no noble lineage. No military distinction. He smiled with too many teeth. What do you offer beyond novelty? The hall went quiet. Every eye turned toward me. I set down my utensil carefully, meeting his gaze. You're right that I have no noble birth. On Earth, I was a mid-level trade negotiator. My family comes from a line of teachers and farmers. I paused. But I think the question isn't what I offer the princess. The question is what I offer her son. Vex's expression soured. Elaborate. Caden is brilliant, curious, and braver than he knows. He's also sick, grieving, and learning to navigate a world that expects him to be perfect. I glanced at Lyran, who had gone very still. He doesn't need someone with a noble title. He needs someone who will hold him when he's scared, tell him stories when he can't sleep, and show him that it's okay to be human, or in his case, Valerian, and flawed and still worthy of love. And you believe you can provide that? Lady Sora, another senior noble, asked. You, who will age and die while the boy is still a child by our standards? The cruelty of the question landed like a blade, but I'd known it was coming. I can't give him forever. But I can give him now. I can give him someone who chooses to stay as long as possible, who makes every moment count. I looked directly at Lady Sora. Isn't that better than the alternative? Someone who lives as long as you do but never really commits, who stays at arm's length to avoid the pain of caring? A murmur ran through the crowd. Lord Vex leaned forward. You speak boldly for someone in no position to make demands. I'm not making demands. I'm answering your question honestly. I kept my voice level. You asked what I offer? The answer is presence. Commitment. The willingness to show up every day and do the hard work of being part of their lives, for however long I have. Pretty words, Vex said. Let's see if you can back them with knowledge. Tell me, what is the significance of the ceremony of stars? He'd switched tactics, trying to expose my ignorance of Valerian culture. I'd studied the briefing materials extensively, but there were gaps. It's the ceremony where Valerian youth come of age, I said carefully. They spend a night alone in the wilderness and return having chosen their adult name. Incorrect. Vex's smile widened. They don't choose their adult name. They choose which ancestor's name to carry forward. The difference is critical. It speaks to our values of honoring the past while building the future. He'd crept up my neck. I'd gotten it wrong in front of the entire nobility. Then, Princess Lyran spoke for the first time that evening. Lord Vex, when did you last attend a ceremony of stars? He blinked. The ceremony is for youth, Your Highness. Indeed. So you're relying on memory from what, 60 years ago? She turned to the assembled nobles. The ceremony has evolved. Modern participants often blend an ancestor's name with their own choice, creating something new from something old. The human's answer wasn't incorrect. It was simply incomplete. She just defended me. Publicly. The implications rippled through the hall like a shockwave. Lord Vex's face darkened. Your Highness, with respect, your obvious favor toward the human is precisely why many of us question this entire proceeding. The trials exist to ensure worthiness, but what value do they have if you've already made your choice? I've made no choice, Lyran said coldly. I've simply corrected a misrepresentation. If you wish to test the human's knowledge, do so fairly. The tension in the room crystallized into something dangerous. I could feel the nobility splitting into factions, some supporting Vex's conservative stance, others watching Lyran with calculation. Queen Ashira had remained silent throughout the exchange, but now she stood. The hall fell into immediate silence. The fourth trial is not about cultural knowledge, she said. Any fool can memorize facts. This trial tests character, how you handle being attacked, undermined, and tested by those who wish to see you fail. She looked at me. You've been honest when honesty could hurt you. You've defended not yourself, but your value to my grandson. You've shown respect for our culture while admitting your limitations. She turned to Lord Vex. And you have revealed that some among our nobility are more interested in maintaining tradition than considering what might actually serve the royal family's well-being. Vex's expression shuddered. The Queen had just publicly rebuked him. Your Majesty, I meant no, you meant exactly what you said. And now I have said what I mean. Ashira's voice could have cut steel. The human passes the fourth trial. The fifth will commence in 3 days. She swept from the hall, leaving a wake of shocked silence. Princess Lyran rose to follow her mother, but before she left, she caught my eye. Walk with me, she said quietly. It wasn't a request. I stood, acutely aware of 70 pairs of eyes tracking our movement as we left the hall together. She led me to a private garden, one of the palace's quiet spaces where bioluminescent plants created pools of soft light. Her guard remained at the entrance, granting us the illusion of privacy. "Thank you," I said, "for defending me in there. I wasn't defending you. I was defending the truth." But her expression softened slightly. Though I will admit Vex's attack was more vicious than I expected. He views any change to traditional power structures as a threat. Is that what I am? A threat? You're a human who made my son laugh and me hope. To people like Vex, that's the most dangerous kind of threat. She moved closer, her luminescence painting my skin in shades of blue and gold. The next trial will be harder. My mother hasn't told me what it is, which means it's something significant. Any advice? Yes. Stop trying to prove you're worthy of me. Her eyes met mine with startling intensity. Start showing me why you want this beyond the politics or the trials. Show me the person under the diplomat. I don't know how to do that here, I admitted. Everything is a performance. Everything is being watched and measured. She studied me for a long moment, then made a decision I saw crystallize in her expression. Come with me. She led me deeper into the garden, to a section I hadn't known existed. Here, the plants grew wilder, less manicured. A small stream ran through the space, and the sound of water created a bubble of privacy. This was my place, she said quietly. When I was young and the weight of being here felt like too much, I would hide here. My mother knew, but she let me have it. She sat on a stone bench near the water. After my husband died, I came here every night for months. Caden was too young to understand where his father had gone, and I couldn't break down in front of him. So I broke down here. The vulnerability in her words made my chest ache. I sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Why are you telling me this? Because if you're going to be part of our lives, you need to understand what you're walking into. She looked at the water, her reflection fracturing in the current. My husband was a good man. Strong, honorable, devoted to Caden and me. But even he struggled with the pressure of being royal consort. The scrutiny. The expectations. The constant awareness that any mistake would reflect on me, on my mother, on the entire succession. She turned to face me. And he was Valerian. He understood our culture instinctively. You'll be learning as you go, making mistakes that people like Vex will use as weapons against us. Are you prepared for that? Truly? No, I said honestly. I'm terrified. But I'm more afraid of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. That's not an answer. That's romance talking. But her voice held no judgment, only exhaustion. I need to know you understand the practical reality. The loneliness when I have to attend functions you're not permitted to join. The frustration when cultural differences create misunderstandings. The pain when people you thought were friends reveal they only tolerated you for political access. You're trying to scare me away. I'm trying to make sure you know what you're committing to. She wrapped her arms around herself. Because Caden is already attached. He talks about you constantly. Asks when you're coming back, tells his tutors about the human who promised not to quit. Her voice cracked. If you leave now, it will hurt him. If you leave after we've built something real, it will break him. I understood then what she was really asking. Not whether I could handle the politics or the cultural barriers. Whether I could handle the weight of a child's trust and a widow's guarded heart. I can't promise I'll be perfect, I said. I'll make mistakes. Cultural ones, personal ones. I'll probably embarrass you at formal events and say the wrong thing to important people. I shifted closer. But I can promise that when Caden has a nightmare, I'll be there. When you need someone to remind you that you're more than the heir to an empire, I'll be there. And when the pressure gets to be too much and you need to hide in a secret garden, I'll either give you space or sit beside you in silence, whichever you need more. She was quiet for a long moment. You asked me to dinner? Earlier. You told me to ask again after I survived. I did. She looked at me, and her carefully constructed walls had cracks running through them. Ask me again. Princess Lyran, would you have dinner with me? Not as a trial. Just as two people trying to figure out if this impossible thing might somehow work. Yes, she whispered. But not in the palace. Somewhere private. Is that allowed? A small smile touched her lips. Probably not. But I'm tired of following every rule designed to protect me from potential pain. She stood. Tomorrow night. I'll send you details. She left me in the garden, and I sat listening to the water until my heart stopped racing. Somewhere in the palace, the nobility was probably dissecting every moment of the banquet. The queen was planning the next trial. And Caden was hopefully sleeping peacefully, dreaming of whatever brought joy to grieving children. I'd passed another test, but the hardest ones were still coming. Not the ones designed by the queen or the council. The ones built into the foundation of trying to love across impossible distances, species, culture, time. But for the first time since I'd smiled at her in that throne room, I believed we might actually have a chance. The next night, a cloaked figure appeared at my door. One of Lyran's personal attendants handed me a small device and instructions to follow the map it displayed. The route led through servant corridors and hidden passages I'd never seen, emerging finally in a section of the palace that seemed older, less maintained. Lyran waited in a small room that looked like it had once been a storage space. She transformed it with simple touches, soft lighting, cushions arranged around a low table, and food that smelled incredible. This was my grandmother's meditation room, she explained. When she died, it fell into disuse. No one comes here anymore. She traded her formal robes for something simpler, and, with her hair unbound and her guards stationed outside, she looked younger. More like the person she might have been without the weight of an empire on her shoulders. We sat, and for the first time since I'd arrived on this world I felt like I could breathe. Thank you for this. Don't thank me yet. I'm a terrible cook. But she smiled as she served the food. Caden helped me choose the menu. He insisted you'd like the sweetbread because humans have strange taste in food. I laughed, and the sound felt foreign after days of careful diplomatic control. He's not wrong. We ate, and somehow the conversation flowed easier than it had anywhere else. She told me about Caden's latest obsession with ancient Earth mythology, which he'd discovered in the palace database. I told her about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, and how strange it felt to be the focus of an entire galaxy's attention. Do you miss it? She asked. Earth. Your family. Sometimes. But I knew when I took this assignment that I might not go back for years. I hesitated. My mother asked me before I left why I was willing to spend so much time away from home. I told her I was looking for something I couldn't find there. Did you know what it was? No. Not then. I met her eyes. I think I do now. The air between us shifted, charged with possibility. Lyran set down her cup, her expression turning serious. The 5th trial is tomorrow. My mother told me what it is. My stomach tightened. And? You'll be given access to classified intelligence about human-Valorian relations. Information that could give Earth significant diplomatic advantage. She paused. Then you'll be asked to brief my mother's council. What you choose to share, and what you choose to protect, will determine whether you're capable of balancing loyalty to your people with commitment to ours. That's impossible. Any choice I make will be wrong to someone. Yes. That's the point. Her voice was gentle but firm. Being royal consort isn't about having the right answers. It's about making difficult choices and living with the consequences. I understood then what Queen Ashira was really testing. Not my strength or knowledge or even my commitment to Lyran. My ability to exist in the impossible space between two worlds without being torn apart. What would you do? I asked. If you were in my position? That's not a question I can answer. This trial is yours alone. She reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. But I can tell you this, I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be honest. Even when honesty costs you. Her hand moved the last inch, her fingers brushing mine. The contact sent electricity up my arm. I should go, she said, but didn't move. Someone will notice I'm missing. Probably. We sat there, hands barely touching, the weight of tomorrow pressing down on us both. Finally, she stood, and the moment broke. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said quietly, thank you for trying. For being brave enough to keep showing up. She left through a hidden door I hadn't noticed, and I sat alone in her grandmother's meditation room, trying to prepare for an impossible choice and knowing that no matter what I decided, someone I cared about would pay the price. The fifth trial began in a secure briefing room. Queen Ashira sat at the head of a table, flanked by her senior advisors. Princess Lyran was notably absent. This test I would face alone. A Valerian intelligence officer presented me with data chips containing detailed analysis of human military capabilities, economic vulnerabilities, and classified diplomatic communications. Information that Earth would pay fortunes to protect, laid out before me with clinical precision. You have 2 hours to review this material, the Queen said. Then, you will brief my council on what you've learned. Your analysis will help us determine how to approach future negotiations with your homeworld. The trap was beautifully constructed. If I refused to brief them, I'd fail the trial and prove myself untrustworthy. If I briefed them fully, I'd betray Earth's confidence and prove I couldn't be trusted to hold Valerian secrets either. If I tried to selectively edit the information, I'd demonstrate dishonesty. I spent the 2 hours reading everything, my mind racing through scenarios. When the time came, I faced the council with my decision made. Your Majesty, honored council members, I've reviewed the intelligence you provided. Before I brief you, I need to address the nature of this test. I took a breath. You're asking me to prove I can be trusted with Valerian interests by demonstrating I'm willing to betray human ones. I understand the logic, but I can't accept the premise. The room went very quiet. Explain, Queen Ashira said, her voice dangerously soft. If I betray my own people's trust to gain yours, what does that teach you about my character? That I'm willing to sacrifice my values for personal advantage. That my loyalty can be bought. I met her eyes. But if I refuse to betray Earth, you learn that I can keep secrets even under pressure. That my word has value. That if I promise to protect Valerian interests, that promise means something. So you refuse to brief us? One advisor asked. No. I'll brief you, but only on information that doesn't compromise Earth's security. I'll tell you what you need to know to build a genuine alliance, not what you need to exploit vulnerabilities. The silence stretched. I'd gambled everything on a principle, and I had no idea if it would work. Queen Ashira stood. Leave us, she told her advisors. They filed out, confusion evident on their faces. When we were alone, the Queen circled the table to stand directly in front of me. You just refused a direct order from the Valerian Queen. Yes, Your Majesty. You prioritized your moral code over passing a trial that determines your entire future here. Yes. She studied me with those cold, infinite eyes. Then, impossibly, she smiled, a real smile, warm and approving. Good. You passed. I blinked. What? The test wasn't whether you'd betray Earth. It was whether you'd betray yourself. She returned to her seat. My daughter needs a partner who has a spine, who can say no even when it costs them, who understands that some things are more important than political advantage. She gestured to the data chips. The information we gave you was partially falsified, by the way. Accurate enough to seem real, but incomplete enough to be useless for actual military planning. Relief and residual adrenaline made my knees weak. So I didn't actually have to, you didn't know that. You made your choice believing the information was real and the consequences would be severe. Her expression turned serious again. But understand this, you've now proven you can keep secrets and refuse orders when your conscience demands it. That will make you powerful allies and dangerous enemies among my court. I'm not trying to make enemies. You're trying to court my daughter. The enemies come with the territory. She pulled out a small crystalline device. The 6th trial begins in 2 days. It will be the hardest yet, because it will involve Caden directly. Use this time to prepare. I left the briefing room feeling like I'd survived a firing squad, only to be told another one was scheduled. But, as I walked the corridors back to my quarters, I passed a window overlooking one of the gardens. Princess Lyran stood there with Caden, both of them examining something in the plants. As if sensing my presence, she looked up. Our eyes met across the distance, and she smiled, that same smile that had started everything. Caden saw me and waved enthusiastically, pointing to whatever they'd found and clearly wanting to show me. I waved back, and in that moment I knew why I was doing this. Not for political advancement or diplomatic advantage. Not even just for Lyran, though that would have been reason enough. For the chance to be part of something real. A family, strange and impossible as it was, that had somehow started to feel like where I belong. 2 days later, Thex escorted me to Caden's private quarters. The 6th trial, he explained, would test my ability to connect with the child beyond superficial charm. Caden sat in a room full of educational holos and expensive toys, but his attention was fixed on a simple sketchpad. When he saw me, his face lit up. "You came!" "Mama said you would, but I wasn't sure. I promised I wouldn't quit," I reminded him, sitting across from him. "What are you drawing?" He showed me a crayon sketch of what appeared to be a family. 2 large figures and 1 small one, rendered in the enthusiastic but anatomically improbable style of a child his age. "That's me and Mama," he explained, pointing. "And that's you?" My heart lurched. "That's a great picture. Do you like it? I worked really hard on your smile. Mama says you have a nice smile." Before I could respond, Queen Ashira entered, Princess Lyran at her side. Caden's mood immediately shifted, his earlier enthusiasm dampening. "Caden," the Queen said gently, "we need to talk about something important." The boy's small hands clenched around his sketchpad. He knew, I realized. Whatever this trial was, he'd been briefed. Lyran knelt beside her son. "Remember how we talked about your condition? About how the treatments work?" Caden nodded, his eyes already filling with tears. "The doctors have developed a new treatment," Lyran continued, her voice carefully controlled. "But it's going to be difficult. You'll need to stay in the medical wing for several days, and it might make you feel sick." "I don't want to," Caden whispered. "I know, sweetheart. But it could help you feel better. Fewer episodes." The Queen spoke next. "Caden, we've asked the human to be here because this is part of his trial. We need to see if he can handle the difficult parts of caring for you, not just the fun moments." I understood with crystalline clarity what was being asked. This wasn't about me comforting Caden through a brief episode. This was about whether I could be there through genuine medical trauma, watching a child I'd grown to care about suffer, and not break or run. Caden looked at me with those huge eyes. "Will you stay? During the treatment?" "If your mother says I can, yes." "Mama?" Lyran's expression was carefully neutral, but I saw the test in her eyes. If the human is going to be part of our lives, he needs to understand what that means. All of it. "Then yes," I said to Caden. "I'll stay." The treatment began that evening. Caden was connected to machines that hummed and glowed, pumping modified cellular structures into his small body in an attempt to correct the genetic flaw that made him sick. The doctors warned it would be painful. They were right. Caden lasted 20 minutes before the screaming started. High, awful sounds that no child should make. Lyran held one of his hands, her face a mask of controlled anguish. I held the other, whispering nonsense comfort that felt utterly inadequate. "It hurts," he sobbed. "Mama, make it stop." "I can't, baby. I'm so sorry, but we have to let it finish." "I want Papa." He'd make it stop. The words hit Lyran like a physical blow. Her husband had been dead 3 years, But grief didn't follow a timeline. Neither did a child's desperate wish for a parent who could make everything better. I kept holding Caden's hand, kept murmuring soft words, even as my own heart fractured watching him suffer. Hours blurred together. At some point, Queen Ashira left. The guards rotated shifts. But Lyran and I remained, bracketing her son through the worst night of his young life. Near dawn, the treatment finally ended. Caden fell into an exhausted sleep, his small hands still gripping mine so hard my fingers had gone numb. Lyran looked at me across her son's sleeping form. Her carefully controlled mask had finally cracked, tears streaming silently down her luminescent face. "This is what it means," she whispered. "Nights like this. Watching him hurt and being powerless. Carrying the knowledge that he might not survive to adulthood, that his condition could kill him despite our best medicine. I know. Do you?" Her voice broke. "Because this is the reality, not the sweet moments in gardens or throne rooms. This is what you're signing up for if you continue. A child who might die young, who will definitely suffer, who will always carry the shadow of a father he barely remembers and might resent you for trying to replace. I'm not trying to replace his father. Then, what are you trying to do?" I looked at Caden's sleeping face, still streaked with tears. "Be present. Be consistent. Be someone he can count on when the world hurts. And when he dies?" The question was brutal in its directness. "Because his condition is degenerative. We're buying time, not curing him. What will you do when this beautiful, brilliant child stops breathing and there's nothing any of us can do? The same thing you'll do. Break. Grieve. Somehow keep living anyway." I met her eyes. "You're asking me to guarantee I won't be destroyed by loving him. I can't. The only guarantee I can give is that I'll love him anyway, for however long we have." Something in her expression shifted. Not acceptance, exactly, but recognition. She understood what I was offering because she lived it every day, the terrible courage of loving someone you might lose. "The trial is over," she said quietly. "You passed. You stayed when it was hard, when it would have been easier to leave. This wasn't about the trial. I know." She reached across her sleeping son to touch my hand briefly. "That's why you passed." We sat in silence as the sun rose, two people keeping vigil over a child who had somehow become the center of both our worlds. When Caden finally woke, groggy and sore but alive, his first bleary words were, "You stayed." "Of course I stayed," I told him. He smiled, small and exhausted, and fell back asleep holding both our hands. Queen Ashira found us there an hour later. She studied the scene, her daughter, her grandson, and the human who'd refused to leave, and simply nodded. "One trial remains," she said. "Rest first. You've earned it." The final trial was announced 3 days later, after Caden had recovered enough to be moved from the medical wing back to his quarters. The entire court assembled in the Great Hall, nobility and dignitaries from across the Valerian Empire filling every available space. Queen Ashira stood before her throne, Princess Lyran and Caden at her side. I stood alone in the center of the hall, acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes watching my every breath. "We have witnessed 6 trials," the Queen's voice rang out. "Tests of body, mind, heart, and will. The human diplomat has proven himself capable beyond what many expected." She paused. "But one question remains unanswered. One test that cannot be designed or controlled." She gestured, and Lyran stepped forward, Caden holding her hand. "The 7th trial is simple," Ashira continued. "Princess Lyran will ask a question. The human will answer truthfully, before all assembled witnesses. There will be no privacy, no time to prepare, no diplomatic carefully worded responses. Just honesty or its absence." My pulse hammered. This was it, the final trap, designed to expose any remaining doubt or hidden agenda. Lyran looked at me across the distance of the hall. In her eyes I saw fear and hope tangled together so tightly they were inseparable. "Why do you want this?" she asked, her voice clear and strong. "Not the diplomatic advantages. not the political alliance. Why do you want to be part of our lives? What do you gain that's worth everything you've endured? The hall fell into absolute silence. This was the question beneath every trial, every test. The one that mattered most. I took a breath and let the truth out. I was alone before I met you. Not physically. I had colleagues, acquaintances, people I saw regularly. But alone in the way that matters. I'd convinced myself that I was fine with surface connections, that deep relationships were for other people, that I was too busy or too practical or too whatever to need more. I looked at Caden. Then, a child asked me if I was funny and trusted me to hold him when he was hurting. And I realized I'd been lying to myself about what I wanted from life. My eyes shifted to Lyran. And then, a woman who had every reason to guard her heart smiled at me anyway. She showed me what courage actually looks like, not fearlessness, but choosing to hope despite having been broken before. I took a step closer. What do I gain? The chance to matter. To be part of something that makes me better than I am alone. To love and be loved in return, even knowing it will hurt when it ends, because that pain is the price of having something real. The hall remained silent, waiting. I gain a family? I said simply. Strange and complicated and built across impossible distances. But mine if you'll have me. Lyran's careful control finally broke. Tears spilled down her face as she smiled, the fullest, most unguarded smile I'd seen from her. Yes. She whispered, then louder. Yes. Caden broke free from his mother's grip and ran to me, launching himself into my arms with complete trust that I would catch him. I did, holding him close as he wrapped small arms around my neck. Does this mean you're staying? He asked. If your mother and grandmother agree, yes. I'm staying. Queen Ashira descended from her throne, and the assembled court dropped into formal bows. She approached us, me holding her grandson, her daughter crying and smiling simultaneously, and studied us with those infinite eyes. The human has completed all 7 trials, she announced. He has proven himself worthy of consideration as royal consort. She paused, and for the first time, I saw something almost warm in her expression. But more importantly, he has proven himself worthy of my daughter's trust and my grandson's love. She placed one hand on Caden's head, the other on Lyran's shoulder. I grant formal permission for this courtship to continue. Let those who object speak now or hold their peace. Lord Vex stepped forward, and my stomach dropped. But instead of objecting, he bowed deeply. Your Majesty, I withdraw my opposition. The human has shown more integrity than I credited him with. He looked at me directly. You have my respect, if not yet my full trust. Earn that, and you'll have my support. It was as close to a blessing as I'd get from the conservative faction, and probably more than I deserved. The Queen raised her voice again. Then let it be recorded, the human diplomat is formally recognized as suitor to Princess Lyran, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. She smiled, sharp and proud. Welcome to the family. Try not to let it kill you. The hall erupted into applause, cheers, and undoubtedly some whispered opposition that would make itself known later. But in that moment, holding Caden while Lyran moved to stand beside me, her hands slipping into mine, I didn't care about the politics or the complications to come. We'd survived the trials. Everything else we'd figure out together. That night, after the formal celebrations had ended and Caden had finally been coaxed to sleep, Lyran and I stood on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The twin moons cast everything in shades of silver and blue. So, she said quietly, you're officially courting me now. How does it feel? Terrifying. Wonderful. Completely surreal. I turned to face her. How does it feel for you? The same. She leaned against the balcony rail. We're going to face opposition. Factions who think I should marry for political advantage. Nobles who believe humans are inferior. People who will say terrible things about us, about Caden, about any future we try to build. I know. And we still haven't solved the fundamental problem. You'll age and die while I'm still young. Caden will lose another father figure. I'll have to bury another person I love. I know that too. She turned to look at me, and in the moonlight, her luminescence seemed to shine brighter. And you still want this? More than I've ever wanted anything. She moved closer, until we stood near enough to touch but not quite touching. Then we do this the right way. No rushing. We take time to actually know each other beyond the trials and politics. We let Caden set the pace for how our family forms. We build something real, even if it's hard. Agreed. And if at any point you realize this isn't what you want. I stopped her with a gentle touch to her face, my hand cupping her luminescent cheek. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me now. She leaned into my touch, her eyes closing briefly. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll tell me when it's hard. When the politics get to be too much, or the cultural differences frustrate you, or you miss Earth so badly it hurts. Don't pretend to be fine when you're not. Only if you promise me the same thing. No more hiding in secret gardens alone when you need support. Deal. She opened her eyes, and they were luminous with unshed tears. I'm scared. Me too. But less scared than I was before you arrived. Same. We stood there as the moons traced their path across the sky, two people from different worlds trying to build a bridge between them. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and misunderstandings, political battles and personal struggles. But we'd face 7 trials and come through them. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. Somewhere in the palace, Caden slept peacefully, probably dreaming about the strange human who'd promised not to quit. Somewhere else, Queen Ashira was likely planning how to manage the political fallout of her daughter's unconventional choice. And across the galaxy, Earth's diplomatic corps was probably having collective panic attacks about what this meant for interstellar relations. None of that mattered in this moment. In this moment there was just us, a princess who'd learned to hope again, a human who'd found where he belonged, and the promise of a future we'd write together. So, Lyran said softly, about that dinner you asked for. The one that wasn't a trial. I smiled. Yes? Tomorrow night. Just us. No guards, no politics, no trials. Just 2 people getting to know each other. I'd like that. Good. She leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek, her luminescence warm against my skin. Don't be late. I'm told humans are terrible with timing. Who told you that? Caden. He says you're always rushing around looking worried. I laughed, the sound echoing across the garden. He's not wrong. She smiled and turned to leave, but paused at the balcony door. Thank you. For staying through all of it. For choosing us. Thank you for letting me try. She disappeared into the palace, leaving me alone with the stars and the impossible reality of what we'd just begun. I'd come to this world as a diplomat trying to negotiate a trade agreement. I was leaving this balcony as the official suitor to the heir of the Valerian Empire, unofficial father figure to a brilliant, sick child, and somehow, miraculously, exactly where I was meant to be. The journey ahead would be hard. But standing there under alien moons, I couldn't wait to begin. Tomorrow, we'd have dinner. The day after, we'd navigate court politics. And every day after that, we'd wake up and choose each other, build our strange family, and prove that love could bridge any distance, even the one between stars. I smiled at the thought, and headed inside, already planning what stories I'd tell Caden in the morning. After all, I'd promised not to quit. And I intended to keep that promise for the rest of my life, however long that might be.